This is Purpose of Life. Welcome to Purpose of Life, Purpose and Life. For many years and many times I think power is all about position. I think many of you will agree with me just to think that power is all about position, because even if you look at generally people in power, they want to stay in power because it's all about position, it's all about authority. In today's episode, we have with us Madhana Kumar, who is an expert in the subject servant leadership. So we're going to ask Madan a few direct questions on this topic, servant leadership, but also talk about world standard of power and God's standard of power. Madan, it's a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Ashwin.
Madan, of course, the topic, you're an expert in the topic servant leadership. But one of my fundamental things which the world is always seeking after is position and power. And we see men of great influence like Hitler, you find Stalin, you find several world leaders. But you also have leaders like Nelson Mandela, Gandhi. So define power from a world standard and define power from a God standard. Explain the whole process.
Yeah, people who have studied power basically, put power under various categories, right? It starts with coercive power, where you can force somebody else to do something.
Correct.
Or legitimate power because you have the legal position like a policeman or somebody like that, or you have the rewards power, right? Or because you have the power to reward somebody.
Correct.
Right? Or what they call also as the referral power, right? That is, you.
Or you can refer somebody for.
No, it's not. Referral power slightly goes based saying, by if you do something that is liked by the leader, then you get
you win his favor.
More affection. You win his or her favor and things like that. So there are different aspects of power. But immaterial of what is the aspect of power, what differentiates actually between a Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi versus the Saddam Hussein or Hitler or Osama bin Laden, if you want to take extreme examples, is what they use the power for, right? And that is where basically the segregation of personalized power versus socialized power comes in, right? And so the world itself is today studying these two aspects differently, whether it is socialized power or personalized power. And people who use the personalized power are the people who end up as dictators and autocratic leaders and people like that, right? But the people who use power for social benefit, which is the socialized power concept, those are the ones whom you want to follow. You love talking about, because they are the ones who leave a legacy. Correct. For others and things like that, right? So that is really the difference between these. And in God's way, power is to be used only for demonstrating the love for others. It's not for something. It is not for anything else. It is for protecting. Power is to be used for protecting people, right? Not for hurting people, but for protecting people, for providing for people, for helping people to grow and succeed, right? So those are the ways in which power should be used, and that is really what God's sketch of leadership also talked about, right? You have the power, so go now use it for people's benefit, protect them from enemies, provide food for them, help them to grow and succeed and things like that. And that is the major difference that comes in. Yeah.
I would like you to the scene of where Jesus is brought before Pilate.
Yeah.
It's a very beautiful scene.
Yeah.
And Jesus is brought there, and Pilate just says that I have the power to to release you.
Yeah.
And how do you see that? That's he's talking about solid power.
Yeah.
He's saying I have the power to release you, and Jesus remarkably gives a brilliant answer. But just explain that whole process of power from that perspective.
Lovely, good that you asked. Actually, Pilate's power is a great example of what we call as the legitimate power.
Legitimate power,
right? Because he is there because of a position,
correct?
Given by him by a higher authority,
right.
the Caesar,
the Roman,
empire, right? So he is there because of his legitimate position. So that is what is called as the legitimate power.
Right.
But then Jesus is referring to something more.
More.
Jesus is something to what we would today call as relational power.
Relational power.
Who are you related with, or in other words, who are you drawing the power from? Not because of legitimacy or legality, but your connection, right? Who do you get the power from, right? And of course, the ultimate fact that Jesus is referring to is that even legitimate power comes from God.
Correct.
And unless God gives you the power, you can't even have legitimate power.
Correct.
Right? So that is also a fact. However, Jesus is referring to, that is, your power comes from your legitimates given by somebody else.
Correct.
But, obviously my power comes from my relationship with my Father, right? So that is the, relational power that one would be talking about, right? You draw power not because you have any authority or legitimate authority over others, but because of the influence you have on others, right? So that is the big difference, and that is why nowadays we define leadership as influence, nothing less, nothing more, as John Maxwell puts it, right? It is about influence, and you don't necessarily need to have authority to do that. I mean, if you have authority, good. But again, use that authority for the benefit of others, not for your self-aggrandizement, as it is called.
So what you're saying is power is all about influence.
Yeah.
So
power is all about using it to influence, and using it to influence in a positive way. Yeah. Because power could be used to influence you negatively, to create fear in you.
Absolutely.
Or to say that, okay, look, I have the power to reward. So if you don't obey me, you will, that's not the way God doesn't say that, look, if you don't love me, I will not love you back.
Correct.
God says, immaterial of whether you love me or not, I will love you back, because I cannot change myself, right? That is the big difference.
Yeah.
It's not conditional to something.
Yeah.
He knows that he is bestowing power, and that is unconditional.
Good. That's a beautiful explanation. And before we take a break, we're going to take a short break. Can you give us an example from the Bible of someone who really used power and somebody who really abused power? So I'm just referring that as an example of point of learning. Somebody who really used power to influence, and somebody who really abused it. So we'll talk about that. That's coming after the short break. We are talking about a very important topic of this word power, but from God's perspective. Don't miss it.